A new home. I was 10 years old when my father got a new job. One evening he came home and told us the news. "We are moving to a new city," he said. My mother smiled, but I saw worry in her eyes. My two sisters looked at each other. I did not know what to think. Moving to a new city sounded big and strange. We had lived in the same house all our lives. It was small but warm. Our neighbors were kind and the streets were familiar. I knew every corner of our neighborhood. I knew where the best trees were for climbing and where the best spots were for playing hide and seek. My school was close to our house and my best friend lived next door. The idea of leaving scared me. The next few weeks were busy. My parents packed boxes every day. My sisters and I helped, but we were sad. We found old toys and books that we forgot we had. We sat on the floor looking at them, remembering old times. My mother told us to put them in boxes, but I did not want to. Packing felt like saying goodbye. Every day I walked around our neighborhood, trying to remember everything. I touched the trees, the walls, and the door of my school. I wanted to keep the memories in my heart. I sat on the steps of our house looking at the street. The place felt different now. It was still our home, but soon it would not be. Then the moving day came. A big truck stopped in front of our house. The driver got out and smiled at us. My father talked to him while we carried our boxes outside. The truck was big and empty, waiting to take all our things. My mother held my sister's hands. My father checked everything. I stood by the car looking at our home one last time. The windows, the door, the small garden, all of it was a part of my life. I wanted to take one last walk around the house, but there was no time. As we drove away, I watched the streets pass by. The shops, the park, and the houses became smaller and smaller. I felt like I was leaving a part of myself behind. My sisters were quiet. My mother looked out of the window. My father kept his eyes on the road. A new life was waiting for us, but I did not feel ready. I did not know if I would like the new city. I did not know if I would make new friends. All I knew was that everything was about to change. The car ride felt long. I sat by the window watching the world outside. The roads stretched far and the trees blurred as we moved. My sisters sat quietly. My mother held a small bag on her lap. My father drove without saying much. The car was full, but it felt empty. I thought about my best friend David. We used to play together every day after school. We built forts, raced in the park, and shared secrets. I wondered if he missed me already. I wanted to tell him one more story, to laugh one more time, but it was too late. My new school would have other children, but would I find a friend like David? Hours passed. The sun moved across the sky and the light changed. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, but my mind was too full. I remembered my old house, my small bed, my favorite chair. I wondered if someone else would live there now. Would they change my room? Would they paint the walls a different color? The thought made my chest feel heavy. We stopped at a gas station. My father filled the tank while my mother bought sandwiches. We ate in the car, but no one talked much. The food tasted different, or maybe it was just my mood. I chewed slowly, looking at the road ahead, It was long and straight, leading us somewhere new. As we continued, the sky turned orange and pink. The city was getting closer. The buildings grew taller, and the streets became busier. Cars moved fast, lights flashed, and people walked quickly on the sidewalks. It was nothing like our quiet neighborhood. Everything looked big and strange. Finally, we reached our new home. The building was tall with many windows. The streets outside were loud with honking cars and talking people. My father parked the car and we all stepped out. My legs felt stiff after the long ride. My mother held my sister's hands as we walked to the entrance. I looked up at the sky. It was the same sky, but everything else was different. Inside, the apartment smelled new. The rooms were empty, waiting for us to fill them. The walls were white, the floors shiny. My sisters ran to see their new room. My parents started unpacking. I stood in the middle of the living room, feeling like a stranger. This was home now, but it did not feel like home yet. That night I lay in my new bed, staring at the ceiling. The sounds of the city were loud outside. Cars, voices, footsteps. It was nothing like the quiet nights I knew. I turned on my side, pulling the blanket up. I missed my old room, my old street, my old life. I wondered how long it would take for this place to feel like home. The next morning, I woke up early. The city was already awake. I could hear cars outside, people talking, and footsteps in the hallway. It was different from my old home, where mornings were quiet. I sat up in bed and looked around. The room was still unfamiliar. My suitcase was in the corner, and my clothes were still inside. At breakfast, my parents talked about their plans for the day. My father had to start his new job, and my mother needed to unpack. My sisters ate quietly. I just pushed my food around my plate. I did not feel hungry. Everything felt new, but not in a good way. After breakfast, my mother asked me to help her unpack. We opened boxes and took out plates, cups, and books. The apartment started to look more like home, but it still felt strange. I missed our old house, the wooden floor, the smell of my mother's cooking, and the sound of the neighbor's dog barking. Here, everything was different. Later, my mother sent me to the store. She gave me a list and some money. I put on my shoes and stepped outside. The streets were busy, full of people moving fast. I walked slowly, looking around. The buildings were tall, and the air smelled like food, smoke, and something unfamiliar. I found the store and went inside. It was bigger than the one in our old neighborhood. Shelves were full of things, and people moved quickly. I felt small and lost. I took out the list and started looking for the items. Milk, bread, apples. I found them one by one. When I reached the cashier, I handed her the money and waited. She gave me change and a small smile. It was the first friendly face I had seen all day. Walking back, I looked at the people around me. Some talked on their phones, some carried bags, and some just walked. Everyone seemed busy. No one looked at me. In my old neighborhood, people always said hello. Here, I felt invisible. When I got home, my mother smiled. "Good job," she said, taking the bags. My sisters played in the living room, laughing at something. My father was not home yet. I sat on the couch feeling tired. The day had not been bad, but it had not been good either. That night, I sat by the window, looking at the city lights. They twinkled like stars, but they were not the same. I missed the real stars, the ones I could see from my old bedroom. I wondered if David was looking at the same sky. I wondered if he missed me too. The next day, my father took me and my sisters to see our new school. The building was big, with many windows and a large playground. Children ran around, laughing and talking. Some played soccer, some sat in groups, and others walked alone. I watched them carefully, wondering what kind of school this would be. Inside, the hallways were long and bright. My father spoke to a teacher while we waited. I held my sister's hand. She looked nervous, and so did I. A woman with kind eyes walked toward us. "Welcome," she said with a smile. "This is your new school. You will like it here." I nodded, but I was not sure. She showed us around. The classrooms were big with colorful posters on the walls. Desks were neatly arranged and books filled the shelves. I saw children sitting together, talking. They looked happy, but I felt like an outsider. Everything was new. New faces, new teachers, new rules. I wished I could go back to my old school, where I knew everyone. After the tour, my father took us home. My sisters talked about their new school, but I stayed quiet. My mind was full of questions. Would I make new friends? Would I understand the lessons? Would the teachers be kind? I missed my old school, my old desk, and my old teacher's warm smile. That evening, my mother made my favorite dinner. The smell filled the apartment, making it feel a little more like home. We sat together, eating and talking. My father asked about the school. My sisters said they liked it. I only nodded. I did not want to talk about it. Later, I sat on my bed thinking. Moving was harder than I thought. I missed too many things. My home, my friends, my school. But I knew I could not go back. This was my life now. I had to find a way to make it feel like home. Before sleeping, I stood by the window again. The city lights still felt strange, but they were starting to look familiar. Maybe one day I would feel like I belonged here. Maybe one day I would stop missing my old life. I was not sure when, but I hoped it would be soon. The first day of school arrived. I woke up early, but I did not feel excited. I put on my uniform and ate breakfast quietly. My sisters were excited, talking about their new teachers and classmates. My parents smiled at us, trying to make us feel better. My father said, "Everything will be fine." I wanted to believe him. Walking to school, I felt nervous. The streets were crowded with children and parents. Some kids laughed and talked, while others walked alone. The school looked even bigger than before. My sisters ran ahead, happy to start the day. I walked slowly, not ready for what was coming. Inside, a teacher showed me to my classroom. The room was full of students. Some looked at me, but no one said anything. I sat in an empty seat at the back. The teacher smiled at me and started the lesson. I listened, but my mind was somewhere else. The words on the board looked different. The voices around me sounded unfamiliar. At lunchtime, I took my food and sat alone. The cafeteria was big and noisy. Children talked and laughed in groups. I missed David. We always sat together, sharing our food and telling jokes. Here, I had no one. I ate my lunch quietly, wishing I could be somewhere else. The afternoon felt long. I watched the clock, waiting for the day to end. The lessons were not hard, but I could not focus. I kept thinking about my old school. There, I knew everyone. There, I felt comfortable. Here, I felt lost. When school finally ended, I walked home alone. My sisters ran ahead, talking about their new friends. I listened but did not say much. My mother asked, "How was your first day?" I shrugged. It was okay. I did not want to tell her how lonely I felt. That night I sat by the window again. The city lights blinked in the distance. The world outside was full of people, but I felt alone. I wondered if I would ever feel at home here. Maybe tomorrow would be better. Maybe soon I would not feel like a stranger. I hoped so. The next day at school, something changed. I sat alone at lunch again, but this time, a boy walked up to me. He had a friendly smile and held a tray of food. "Can I sit here?" he asked. I nodded. His name was Alex. He talked a lot. About school, about his favorite games, about the best places to visit in the city, listened quietly. But for the first time, I did not feel so alone. After lunch, Alex introduced me to his friends. They asked me questions about my old city. I told them about my school, my favorite park, and the games I played with David. They listened with interest. One boy said, "You should play soccer with us after school." I was surprised. No one had invited me to do anything since I arrived. I nodded. "Okay," I said. That afternoon, I went to the playground with Alex and his friends. The game started fast. The other boys were good, but I was good too. I ran. I kicked. I passed the ball. For the first time in days, I felt happy. When I scored a goal, Alex cheered. "You're great," he said. I smiled. It felt good to hear that. When I got home, my sisters were already talking about their new friends. My mother asked how my day was. This time I had something to say. It was better, I told her. She smiled and kissed my forehead. "I'm happy to hear that," she said. That night I sat by the window again. The city lights still looked different, but now they did not seem so strange. I thought about my old home, my old school, and my old friends. I still missed them, but now I had something new. New friends, new places, and new memories to make. I did not know when this place would truly feel like home, but for the first time, I believed that one day it would, and that was enough.